Hello ladies and gentlemen, as promised, here is part 2 of my tutorial on the use of organ in contemporary worship. In particular, as it pertains to the use of organ with this song, In Christ Alone. Now the first thing I would like to suggest to organists or keyboardists who may try this is to prepare your heart and mind before you even begin to play on the instrument. The organ is a very powerful instrument. There's a reason it's been called the king of instruments. But this is one point that you want to draw people towards the king of kings and not the king of instruments. So you need to be very, very tactful in the way you use the instrument so that it's just not all about, oh my goodness, the organ is there. But once it does come in, it will really enhance what the worshiper is experiencing at that point. So my suggestion is that during the first 2 verses, you engage and worship yourself in terms of singing or praying. I personally have found myself praying for the musicians, including myself, taking part in the rendition of that, the leading of that song, that we would set aside our egos, even though we know we sound good. We just put it aside, and that everything we do at that point will be just pointing the worshipers towards Christ and His glory. So pray during those first 2 verses, and then get yourself ready at the instrument for the 3rd verse. Now once the 3rd verse comes, as you see, I begin the organ just at the point where it talks about them bursting forth in glorious day. Now the organ, I have everything quiet at the very point that I enter. If you come in there loudly on the organ, you would have absolutely distracted the worshiper from what they're singing at that point, and just drawn attention to yourself alone. But also you will startle the worshiper. So at this point, remember, you're quite well into the story, the narrative of the song, and people are really drawing close now. So you do not want to do anything that's too startling. So your entrance really should be quiet. I highly recommend using a 32-foot Bourdon if you have one in the pedal, or any kind of 32-foot flute stop, a quiet 32-foot that can more be felt than heard, along with some other quiet pedal stops. But in the manuals, you must make sure that all of the boxes, anything that's under expression, is closed. So if your organ has all swells to swell, use it at this point. Also, you may have some reeds on the swell ready to go, so have them actually already pulled when you begin, but because the box will be closed, they won't be loud. So it's kind of like an energy that's grumbling down there. With the 32-foot going as well as the reeds, you get that kind of sense of something bubbling up deep inside and getting ready to burst forth, which goes with the text. And of course, slowly open the swell box as it reaches the climax of that verse. Now at this point, you may have to add some more stops just to really bring it to full organ, because at that point, you do want pretty much full organ. You want to be going gangbusters with the rest of the band at this point. Now, not everyone uses the solid rock interval, but if you do, I highly recommend that rather than just play along with it, use the organ almost as a fanfare. At this point, as you see, I'm doing some triplet chords, and that's something that I would be doing if I had, say, 3 trumpeters playing this with me at an Easter service. That's what they would be playing. So, if you have a nice piercing tuba or a trompet on chamade on that organ, use it at this point to play some of these fanfare triplets during this Christ the Solid Rock section. And then for the last verse, which is really like the celebration of resurrection, continuing celebration of resurrection verse, you want to keep that organ going. I do not normally reduce the instrument at this point too much. If you had really gotten to full organ, as in triple F, yeah, maybe you do want to take it down a notch at this point because you don't want the ears to get tired. But keep it loud because this is a very celebratory verse, and you want to keep the organ going with it. The only time that I do actually bring the organ back down is once the outro begins. As you see, I quickly reduce. So you want to have your general setup with gradual crescendo. So just to recap, you want to pray beforehand that you may decrease and he may increase. That when the organ comes in, it's less of a distraction and more of an enhancement to the worship experience. Secondly, you want to start off quietly but with a rumble. So not so quiet that nothing is heard at all or felt. So use a 32-foot stop, a quiet one, of course, not a bombard. You want to use something like a Bourdon in the pedals, and keep the boxes closed. Keep all of the expression boxes closed, and then gradually open them as that climax in the third verse happens. Then keep a full organ through the final verse and through the solid rock section. But in the solid rock section, you really do want to accentuate some bits and pieces in between. In other words, do not simply play through what the congregation is singing, but embellish it. So in this case, I'm using kind of trumpet-like fanfares. This organ does not demonstrate it that well, but an organ with a really powerful trumpet stop would. So you want to do that in between there. Don't overdo it, otherwise it's again going to lose its effect. But if it's interspersed in between there, that would work nicely. And then finally, do not forget to drop back as the song comes to an end and the band starts to quiet down. You want to quiet down as well in this song. Now, not all contemporary songs work like this one, or call for the organ in this way. And I found that when I was doing this quite a bit a couple of years back, I did not always use the organ whenever there was a worship song being sung. I actually used my discretion as to which songs I would bring the organ in on. That being said, it is really effective in most of the anthem-like choruses out there. So I'm going to demonstrate this again in a couple other contemporary worship songs, just to drive home the point of different ways in which you can use it in contemporary worship. So please subscribe below so that you wouldn't miss any additional videos I may add of some more of these contemporary worship songs and how the organ can really bring them to life. I hope you learned something from this. You can see the details of what I try to teach here in the description below. Take care.